afternoon and welcome to the third of our Talk to Internal Audit sessions. Today we're going to look at independence and objectivity. I hope you've all grabbed a coffee, and I want us to think about how we might support each other through the key challenges that COVID-19 is presenting. And I think independence and objectivity is a challenge on two fronts. So I want us to explore that this morning or this afternoon and think about what we might do with it. I haven't got coffee today. I have got water. That's a different challenge for me, but I hope you're all grabbing a cup of coffee. For those of you that don't know about the Institute, the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors is the professional body that supports, advises and guides the internal audit profession and internal auditors who are members in the UK. And we have probably around 10,000 members. And our members in the UK are part of a global network of 200,000 members. And they are across 170 countries. And therefore you get feedback and information across all of those countries and all of those sources that contribute to the work we as internal audit do. So I think that's really important to be part of that overarching body. So I said independence and objectivity. Internal auditors themselves want to do their bit at the moment to assist their organizations in a more direct way in their hour of need. So I want us to think about how we can be of most use to our organization, but we need to think about what does that mean for independence and objectivity, and I think it impacts on both. So allow me for a moment to look at this from our standards perspective. So Standard 1100 talks about internal audit activity must be independent and internal auditors must be objective in performing their work. Objective, and the standards go on to talk about you shouldn't audit something you've worked in for the last 12 months, which is potentially going to be a challenge for internal auditors now. So I want us to split this session into two parts. Three parts actually. I want us to think about independence and objectivity, and then I want us to think about COVID-19, independence and objectivity. So independence is the ability for us as internal audit to go anywhere in our organizations, to talk to anyone, to access documentation, unless for any specific reason they are legally privileged and we're not part of the circulation. But by and large, it should give us access to everything. And I remember when I first joined internal audit that one of the challenges that we had related to access to some areas of the organization. And one of the things we had was a badge that gave us access to premises. And on the reverse of that badge, we had a message signed by the Lord Chancellor that talked about this person being internal audit and having right of access to all premises, papers, people across the organization, which was also really very useful for us to use when we needed to. So I want us to think about independence. I want us to think also about our organizational independence as internal audit. And that can often be about your reporting lines. Who do we report to? The IIA Code of Practice for the private and third sectors, which is applicable across UK and Ireland, talks about the reporting line for internal audit. And it talks about that reporting line being to the chair of the audit committee, but from an administrative, I tend to call it pay and rations, because that's basically what it is in more often than not, pay and rations perspective to the CEO. That gives us as internal audit that access to the top of your organization, the ability to share information, to provide assurance, to talk to people who are are key stakeholders and the people who need that level of assurance from internal audit. So that's about our independence. And as I said, our objectivity in relation to internal audit is about not being biased. It's about approaching every single piece of work we do without any baggage, looking at what we find, looking at the facts that we gather as part of our audit process, be that talking to people, be that gathering information, be that testing, however we gain that access, so that we can be very clear in our findings and that those findings are supported by the evidence. So being very objective. So the fact that I don't like somebody should not have any bearing on the work I do as an internal auditor. And that's a skill that internal audit needs to develop, that independence and objectivity in terms of what we do and how we approach things. So I think that's really important. I did mention a moment ago the IIA Code of Practice for internal audit in private and third sectors. Don't forget, we also have a financial services code that we originally produced in 2013, revised and updated in 2017, and we've just done a bit of an impact analysis on its success this year, and there's a report available on our website that might be of interest to you. The reason I talk about the codes is because they talk a lot about the importance of internal audit, the seniority of internal audit, the importance of internal audit being of a tier appropriate to undertake audits. So in effect, that puts you at the senior management level for your head of internal audit. I believe that's why we renamed the head of internal audit to the chief audit exec, so that for those organizations that use the language of the C-suite, it puts internal audit very much at that C-suite level. So that is very important for us. Internal audit has to have access to everything. We've talked about that, and we've talked about the reporting line to the chair of the audit committee. One of the things that I have found and still see often is that internal audit is not reporting into the chair of the audit committee. I know of organizations where internal audit still reports into the chief finance officer, and therefore those present some challenges in their own right that we need to be aware of and think about what's that impact on internal audit, on the pressure that may be brought to bear on internal audit in relation to agreeing findings, amending reports, etc. So that's some of the basic rationale behind where we come from, what we do and why we do it. What I want us to think now about, and you will see that there is a polling question, hopefully on your screens. What I want us to think about now is COVID-19 world and the challenges that we as internal audit are facing in this world. I think it would be fair to say, and we need to recognize that these are truly exceptional circumstances. I have never seen anything like this. I haven't spoken to anyone yet that has seen anything like this. Even the financial crisis, people are saying, was not of the scale or the impact across people that the COVID-19 has been. So some of the conversations I've been having with heads of internal audit have been around what is internal audit's role in organizations in this COVID-19 scenario that we are talking about. And I want us to have a think about that as we move forward through this session this morning. So are we being asked to be involved in first line activities? I'm hearing that a significant number of internal auditors are being asked to undertake roles and responsibilities in first line. And that's a variety of different things. It could be working in customer services, answering phones. It could be, I heard of one internal audit team where 2 of the internal auditors were qualified paramedics because they'd had a previous life, and they had immediately been asked to go and work at the front line. It was an NHS trust, and their skill set was used at that point of greatest demand. I am aware of internal auditors being asked to support changes in business processes, to compensate for new government initiatives that are coming out. There was a substantial article in City AM, I think it was either earlier this week or the end of last week, where the conversation was about internal auditors for this particular bank being involved in approving all of the business interruption loans. So the staff, the team processed the applications, but the final sign-off was internal audit. Now, that is internal audit being part of the control process. That is definitely an impact on internal audit's independence, and potentially, you know, move the calendar forward perhaps 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks. Internal audit could be looking from an audit perspective in terms of how the organization has processed these applications. Was the policy clear? Were the procedures adhered to? Were the applications approved appropriately, correctly? And, you know, we need to factor that into our thinking. So in a scenario like that, potentially internal audit's independence has been impacted, and our ability to audit some of these areas moving forward has also been impacted. So we need to share and think about those sorts of things as we move forward. I know some internal auditors are looking at continuing with their internal audit plan, very little change at the moment in terms of what they're doing, and therefore they are in, I would suggest, based on, you know, conversations with, I'm approaching 300 heads of internal audit now in the UK and Ireland. I think they're rather unique. I've heard stories perhaps less where internal audit has been asked to work on first line, but certainly internal audit being involved in helping with regulatory compliance, because of course, as you will all be aware, a number of the regulators have said we won't be doing inspections, we will be delaying requests for documentation, reports, etc. But, and there's always a but there will be an expectation that if anything happens in your organization, significant control failings, risks materializing, regulatory breaches, there will be an expectation that you will contact your regulator as soon as possible. But certainly you must inform your regulator. And that can be from Care Quality Commission, Financial Conduct Authority, Financial Reporting Council, and also the Information Commissioner's Office, whichever regulator. And also from my perspective, because I'm involved in the social housing regulator is also taking a similar line. So often at the moment, internal audit will be asked to support our compliance function, maybe even support a risk function in terms of making sure that we identify key risks. We make sure that those key risks are being assessed properly. Are they a key risk, or is it just somebody thinks it's a key risk? That we have got the right controls in place that mitigate that risk and reduce the likelihood of the risk materializing. So we could be doing second line functions. So although I see that, you know, the people on the call are saying no, their independence or objectivity is not being compromised, that's interesting, because that's certainly not what I have been hearing from, as I said, over 300 or at least 300 heads of internal audit that I have been talking to. Now, it may well be that how we define being compromised, maybe I haven't phrased the question very well, is subject to some perhaps better definition in terms of, you know, what I'm seeking to ascertain when I talk to you or when I ask that question. But definitely everything I am seeing and hearing at the moment indicates that internal audit is being put in a unique position. I'm also seeing and hearing, perhaps as you might expect, internal audit being furloughed, particularly in the retail, leisure, hospitality sector. Again, perhaps not to be surprised. I wouldn't, and I have no inside information, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that there is some impact on the whole of the organisation in terms of British Airways. They have announced already this week 12,000 potential redundancies, which is in effect 25% of their workforce, according to what I saw in the news. Now, is that going to happen? Don't know. Is that information that's been leaked inappropriately? Don't know. But if there is any truth to that, that is an indication that the sector that is anticipated to be one of the hardest hit, that it is affecting even the very long established organizations. And I think that's going to be reflective in the other sectors. So retail sector, there's been news about some retail organizations being in financial difficulties, some retail organizations perhaps not expected to survive the COVID-19 scenario, and therefore that will have an impact on internal audit in their organizations as well. So we need to be aware of all of this in terms of, as I said right at the beginning, how we as internal audit might want to support our organizations moving forward. One of our key thoughts around our organization is helping it be sustainable. And I think that's going to change our approach as we look at some of the new emerging risks moving forward. I think there is opportunities to perhaps be more effective in cost reduction areas, opportunities to help our organization identify areas where they could focus differently, perhaps have a different view. But I think some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves in the current scenario is, and remember I'm talking about independence and objectivity, is will we be auditing our own work at some point in the future? One of the things that is becoming quite clear, certainly from our heads of internal audit virtual forums that meet on a Wednesday afternoon, is that an awful lot of the heads of audit that attend those are from relatively small internal audit teams. And that message came out yesterday on the Institute's webinar that it did with Galvanize, that was looking at the impact of internal audit in the COVID-19. And a significant proportion of the people on the call, and there were over 1,000, were from teams of less than 5 internal auditors. So the smaller our team, the more challenges I think that we face, and the more likely that we might have to audit our own work at some point in the future. I guess my advice would be, if you find yourself in that place, then perhaps there's a sentence at the beginning of the executive summary in the internal audit report that reflects that actually during the COVID-19 crisis, internal audit was working on the first line in this particular area for a period of 8 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever that was, and that there is the risk that, of course, we will be auditing our own work. However, we have asked our colleagues in our quality team to review our report and our working papers to make sure that our report isn't biased in any way. So we can do things like that. We can put balances and checks in to help that. Did we get involved in the last 8 weeks in performing control activities that affected the execution of transactions? And I think that's the one I was giving, the example I was giving, where the internal audit function was signing off the loan applications after they'd been processed. I think another question we might ask ourselves is, did we perform routine activities in connection with the company's operating processes? I think some of the answers to these are going to be yes, because whether we are working first line, second line, whether we are staying as internal audit, we are going to be pushed back. We're going to be auditing different things. We might be supporting the senior management team and the audit committee in different ways. So I think we need to be aware of that as we come out of this. So I think we need to think about how we respond when asked to undertake some of this work. My heart says exceptional circumstances. How can we help our organization, our customers, our employees survive and be a sustainable business moving forward? And I think now is not necessarily the time for internal audit to say perhaps that would be inappropriate because it might compromise our independence. I think sometimes we roll our sleeves up, we work with the business, and let's sort this out afterwards, as long, and there is always a caveat, as long as you have shared with your audit committee, particularly perhaps your audit committee chair, who I hope you are speaking to on a regular basis, certainly weekly, if not more frequently than that. Share with them what you've been asked, share with them why you think it's appropriate in the current scenario, and seek their approval for the course of action you are taking. That will be particularly helpful, and make sure it's documented. That will be particularly helpful in the future when perhaps regulators visit, or when perhaps people look back, including us, because I'm sure we will look back and think, wonder why we did that. Perhaps that wasn't the best thing we could have done. Or the other side of the coin, I wish we'd done more in that space to help our organization. So I think these are all things that we will reflect on when we come out of this. But I think now we need to respond to what our organization is asking of internal audit with the support of our audit committee. So I think that we need to factor those in. What I would ask you also to do is have a look at our COVID-19 Hub. There you will find a whole raft of technical guidance, open to anyone, members and non-members. We also have the results of our weekly Heads of Internal Audit Forum. And the very first one, we've just had number 6, the very first one we had of those on the 25th of March, we came up with some key guiding principles. And I'd just like to share them with you as part of my closing thing. Remember your role. Who are we? Remember that. Take the audit committee chair with you. I've told you that. Prioritize. What is really important in terms of the organization and internal audit? Keep your head up. Get out of the weeds. Now is not the time to be looking in the weeds. Be agile. How can we be fleet of foot? How can we perhaps provide real-time assurance? I talked about that last week, if you remember. Continue to be a trusted advisor. The person, the CEO, the board, even the chairman of the board or the chairman of the audit committee can come to and ask your advice. Ask for your perception of what's happening in your organization at this moment in time. Communicate, talk to people perhaps more than you've ever done. Brilliant opportunity now to build strong relationships with all of your key stakeholders across your organization. Keep a diary. Some point as we come out of this, someone is going to ask what internal audit did. So hopefully, and that was why we came up with this in week 1, hopefully you're keeping a diary that reflects what you've been asked to do, what you have been doing, and what has been the outcome of some of the things that you've been doing. Lead others, lead your team, lead colleagues, support them in difficulties. Some people are really struggling with this working from home, not meeting people, not talking to people face to face. Some, it is being a challenge. So how can we as Internal Audit lead, support, guide our colleagues across our organisation as well as within our own team? And use the IPPF as your reference point. If we deviate from that, make sure we know we have deviated. So keep checking, keep looking. It's a key document for us now and as the future, which is going to be very different from the past, the future evolves. So can I share with you, thank you for joining me this afternoon. I hope you found it helpful and useful. The live stream is available afterwards for friends, colleagues, family. Maybe we ought to be bringing family members into the world of internal audit who may have missed the live version on the Institute's Facebook channel. Follow all of the exciting things the Institute is doing on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I mentioned the webinar that's going to be available on our COVID19 Hub, the recording of that. So please have a listen to that. You might find it interesting. The one we did with Galvanizing the Institute on Tuesday. Sorry, not Tuesday, yesterday. The most exciting news that hopefully you're as thrilled about as I am is that Audit and Risk Magazine has gone digital and will be available on our online with effect from tomorrow, 1st of May. What a great way to start a new month with a digital magazine, which also supports what the Institute is doing around climate change. So hopefully you will embrace that and enjoy reading that. I'm also happy to take questions at any time personally. So my email is on our website. Please don't hesitate to contact me. Next week, and I hope you'll join me again, next week I'm going to look at fraud in the COVID-19 world. What are the things that we need to think about and what's Internal Audit's role in that? Don't forget your coffee, although why don't we break with tradition? Let's have tea next week. I'm going to commit to Earl Grey tea next Thursday at 12. I hope you will join me. And remember, please talk to Internal Audit because the Institute is listening. Thank you, stay safe, and have a great week. Bye.